Hey guys, Charlie Murphy here, playing another session of Ignition $1-$2 no limit 6 max regular tables. Our tables are up and running, so let's jump right in. Lower right hand table, a 3x open from under the gun, and a player who is most likely a recreational player, cold calling in middle position, playing on a shorter stack, calls from MP. Against the 3x open from under the gun, we're going to defend the big blind pretty tightly to begin with, and even tighter with that player overcalling. Queen 9 is not even close to a hand we want to consider calling with in that spot. That's a clear fold. Queen 9 offsuit, that is. Queen 9 suited is probably on the cusp. I think I'd go ahead and call it even with the overcaller because he seems to be pretty bad, or at least likely is, playing short stack and calling from middle position. Upper right-hand table, we're going to open King-Queen offsuit from middle position. We get called by an in-position player on the cutoff. Upper left-hand table, blind on blind, we're going to check in for free with 9-6 offsuit. We're going to check range on the upper right-hand table on Jack-Jack-10 diamond. We've got open-ended straight draw and the flush draw blocker. On this particular turn, we're going to have Ace-Jack, King-Jack, Queen-Jack, 10s full, and probably quite a bit of deuces as well. I'm going to go ahead and overbet, as I really only want to be betting the large hands. The overpairs I can sort of check and be cautious with again, or I could value bet queens, kings, and aces. It could go either way with those. I also could be overbetting various diamond and heart draws. Now over here it goes, checks all the way through, blind on blind. We've got a pair, even though he bets pot. I'm going to take a look and see. I'm pretty sure just that line is so heavily over bluff, we've got to be calling with a pair of nines. You know, could easily have trip kings, which he did, but not the end of the world. Upper right-hand table, we opened under the gun with ace-5 suited. Big blind calls us, Jack-8-9 two-tone. I'm going to go ahead and range bet. This is most likely not solver approved. I'm almost certain it recommends a larger bet or check as opposed to betting small. The pool doesn't seem to punish me for these kind of things, though, and it makes my range easier to play, so I go ahead and do it. Here he check raises, but he check raises on the small side. Looks like that's about a half pot check raise. Of course, I'm going to go ahead and call with the nut flush draw. I'd be calling with pretty much any pair, any 10, you know, even a hand like ace queen of spades, ace king of spades, probably most of my backdoor spade draws, as a matter of fact. So I'm really not folding anything except absolute nonsense, absolute total air. And we've still got a nice nut drawing hand here. We're going to go ahead and call that roughly 75% bet. And now, given that he checks to me, I've really pretty much got a bluff all in or check back. I'm going to bluff all in. I could have jacks, nines, eights, queen 10, hand like jack 9. I don't think there's any merit in betting smaller there. I want to pretty much either bet my real strong hands and my bluffs all in, and mostly otherwise check back. I guess some one-pair hands, especially over pairs like queens, kings, and aces, I could get talked into betting for a smaller size, hoping a one-pair jack hand will hero call me, you know, and it may be asking a bit too much to get hero called by a one-pair hand for the overbet all in. So I wouldn't use the overbet size for a weaker one-pair value hand, but I think I could still maybe bet the overpairs, maybe ace-jack as well, although that blocks the jack-x I'm targeting for the call. But for all the other hands, you know, my queen 10 in my various sets, jacks, nines, and eights, I just want to jam those all in, and I want to use some of my bluffs, some of like my 10x and some of my club draws, mostly club draws that missed. Upper right-hand table, the small blinds opens for 2.5. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet with king 10 suited. I'm going to three bet a 7.5% range here. Something like nines plus ace queen, ace king, the suited ace 10, king 10, queen jack or better, and maybe ace 5 suited, something along those lines. Upper right-hand table, we open king 9 suited on the button. Upper left-hand table, we don't have too much in the way of backdoor equity, so I decided not to stab at that checked pot, but you could stab it as well, especially with some degree of backdoor straight. Now with no real equity, I'm just going to fold when he bets the turn. Small blind min raises me from 2.5x to 5x. I'm calling essentially everything here. Yeah, I don't think I'm folding anything. And yeah, I may 4-bet some hands. I'll still be 4-betting queens plus ace king. Yeah, and maybe you find a bluff hand in there too. Some weak ace x to bluff, but I'm pretty much going to call everything else. Lower right-hand table, I'll go ahead and bet small on jack 10-7 with my eights. I'm just going to flat call in position here in this king 9 with the flush draw and the gut shot. Not going to really try to bluff him off the hand in any, with any kind of crazy raising. Okay, we can go ahead and tag this guy as a recreational player for choosing such a funky bet size, over betting 5.5, 6x pot all in on the turn. That's a good indication this guy's a weak player, though, the way he played that hand, both the pre-flop and the turn. No other way to play that. I don't think there's a whole lot of sense in trying to raise him when we're in position there. It's a hand that we're still so deep, we can hit so many cards, we can get him to pay off. He may spaz into me on any spade there, in which case I'm just, almost certainly going to double up. Lower right-hand table, I got some showdown value against the sevens, against some spades. I don't think there's a ton of merit in trying to bet him off, a 10 if he check called with a 10 or some other kind of pair that beats this. This has enough showdown value, and I've got plenty of worse hands. I'm happy to check this one back. If I had 4 or 5 offsuit, I, of course, would be bluffing. That doesn't beat anything. But the eights, I think, have at least enough showdown value to, if I'm going to check some stuff back and just try to get a showdown, that's as good a hand as any to do it. It'll beat whiff draws and even bottom pair on the flop. Open 4s in middle position on the lower right-hand table. Got called by a recreational player on the button and also by the big blind. We're going to go ahead and check with the player in position to us on the flop. We'd probably be checking a lot on king 10-9 anyway. Okay, now with nobody showing too much interest, I'm going to go ahead and start stabbing. The plan is not to fire one bullet. I think that'd be very poor because we're going to get called by lots of stuff like 10 queen, jack 9, some flush draws that could make a pair later on. And I definitely just want to try and move a guy off a hand here. He could have all kinds of 2-pair hands now as well, or just 1-pair hands that will fold. I'm definitely going to bluff these 4s, not thinking they're short on value, and I'm going to use a pot size bet like I like to do on the 4 straight and 4 flush runouts. Lower left-hand table, you're going to go ahead and open 8s from the cutoff. And when I talk about that pot size river bet on the 4 straight and 4 flush river boards, I've looked at some Pio sims over subsets of the entire game tree with various river bet sizing options and looking for which kind of textures the solver seems to prefer certain types of bet sizes. And pot size bet doesn't seem to be chosen too often compared to either some overbets or some more, 2/3 type bets. But the spots where it was used most frequently that I've seen in a general sense was those 4 straight and 4 flush boards, so that's why I use that the way that I do. Lower left-hand table, we range bet on Jack Deuce Deuce with the pocket eights. On the 7, we checked back. There might be some merit to betting hands better than the 7, just because he doesn't have a ton of jacks. However, I opted to check the 8s back instead of play a bit more cautiously. This is just a very easy call. He could even be having like value betting something like Ace-7 right here. But I'm very content to make that call, and I'm pretty happy to play that hand and check it back where I can either value bet blank rivers or bluff catch leads. We'll open 3s over the poster. We'll fold Queen-7 against the limp in the ISO. We got a 3x open for middle position in the upper left-hand table. We've got Queen-Jack offsuit. That's pretty close. I'm going to go ahead and fold it. Actually, no, this guy's been pretty active, so I'm going to go a bit wider than I otherwise might, and I'm going to go ahead and call it. The upper right-hand table, we've got a 4x 3-bet from the big blind while we're on the button. The player is hard to say if he's a fish or not just because he's short stack, but his stats haven't been fishy as of yet. Trying to decide what that means to me. Either way, this hand might be a little bit loose to start calling with, unless we know the player is aggressive, is like solver level aggressive basically. So I'm going to go ahead and fold it. If he's a fish like he might be because he's shorter stacked, he's probably even more inclined to be passive, which would make me slant even more towards fold. Upper left-hand table. I mean, he could have a flush here, but he has a lot of hands in position. I mean, barreling away. He's got some aggressive stats and some loose preflop stats. There's even a chance he's overvaluing an overpair, so I'm pretty sure there's no real reason to do anything but fold here. Raising, I think, is kind of reckless. I don't want to do that. I'm going to take a look at some MDA. Pot size bets are about neutral, but for middle position, a good bit tighter. 6. And the monotone flop, this actually trends pretty heavily under bluffed. This actually is a bit closer to a fold than I was first giving it credit for. But I don't really think I can fold top 2. I think that's just too nitty, so I'm going to go ahead and call. And he flopped a straight flush. Lower right-hand table, I'm going to go ahead and open the cutoff 2.5x with my pocket 4s. We'll raise blind on blind against Mr. Straight Flush with the Ace-9 suited. We face an essential min raise from the cutoff, so we go ahead and call that with the 4s in position, even though he's a bit shorter and we can't win quite as much if we spike a set. The price is just too good to be folding things, much less 4s. Now, that said, for the 2/3 bet, I'm going to give him a decent degree of credit here and probably fold slightly on the tight side, just because I don't think he's that aggressive with his 3 bets. My plan for getting to the flop is mostly look to make a strong hand, hit my 3rd 4, and get value against overpairs that just start going nuts and let me get in there too cheaply pre-flop. I'm not going to start thinking he has a lot of overcard error in his range, enough to justify some bluff catching, and assume that he's aggressive enough post-flop with it as well. Not when the guy's got some fishy stats and he hasn't shown a whole lot of aggression as of yet. Plus, a lot of times those min raises seem to be awfully nutted. I haven't seen data on that, but that's the general impression I've gotten from playing against them over the years. Upper left-hand table, we're going to open King-9 suited from the cutoff. We get 3-bet by the big blind, who is probably a recreational player, a little over 3x, essentially a 3x 3-bet. We should probably go ahead and call this one too, just because the price is so good. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and call. He checks kind of a raggy board. We've got overcards and a backdoor flush draw. I think this is a very reasonable hand to go ahead and stab at. We're going to use a half pot stab when we're in position in these 3-bet pots. Get check called once. And we turn a king of diamonds. We turn one of our overcards. Now, we could be against ace-king and value cutting ourselves, but we could be against some overpairs with the diamond. I'm going to check on the lower left-hand table, multi-way out of position. I actually think it's more likely he check calls ace-king than he check calls a hand like 10-10 with the diamond. I think that's more likely to bet. I'm actually going to go ahead and check this back and look to either bluff, catch, or value bet the river. Was trying to decide if there's merit in trying to go 3 streets or merit in checking, merit in betting turn to check back the river, but I think I like check back and call or bet best. We also induce bluff from the check call hands as well, so. One more factor I wasn't considered at the forefront of my mind about that, but I sure didn't talk about, but was in there in the back that also would justify checking back some King X. It's probably one of our worst King X, which also makes it a good idea to check it back and in general bet the stronger ones earlier and check back to trap and induce with bluffs with the worst ones. Okay, so 3x 3-bet from the small blind when we're under the gun. I'm going to go ahead and call this too, just because the price is so good. Folding doesn't really feel right. It's a little bit marginal. And I'm going to go ahead and check back on a flop that doesn't really do a whole lot for me. Upper right-hand table, I'm going to open a 7 under the gun. Going to open King 7 blind on blind in the lower left-hand table. And I'm just going to take my short on with ace high at this point. I mean, I lose to some other ace high that plays the same way, but I think he heroes those a decent bit as played, as he probably should. Yeah, if I'm trying to fold out a hand like ace jack, ace queen, ace king, I need to start betting earlier, at least the turn, to double or triple them off. Stabbing on the river is not going to fold out those hands. Going to fold deuce-deuce in the upper left-hand table. Going to range bet on the king-king 7 upper right-hand table. Upper left-hand table, that cutoff open, small blind raise first in. We're just going to play pretty much a 3-better fold strategy. I'm going to check back the ace-7 and look to induce or under-rep and value bet. On the turn, I could be betting 7s full, 6s full, and various kings. Going to go ahead and value bet this now. The bluffs on the turn would be, 8-9. I guess I might not really have much 8-9 under the gun. So a lot of the 9-10 gut shots, a lot of the flush draws, and maybe even mix in some hands like Queen Jack that got blockers to the likely kings in his range to triple off with those. We played the 10s pretty passively, but I'm okay with how we played it. I guess the way he played it's not too bad either if you don't want a 3-bet pre-flop. Lower left-hand table, we're going to open 10-9 of spades in middle position. Under the gun against a 2x open, we've got ace-4. When I face these min raises in the big blind, I start calling a ton more hands, but I get a lot nittier with the 3-betting just because there's less money out there to win one of my 3-bet successful pre-flops. So hand like ace-4, you might 3-bet some against standard size against the min raise. Just go ahead and flat call it. And when it gets with top pair, we can go ahead and check call the half pot size bet and check again on the turn. On the lower left-hand table, we could have aces, ace-king, 8s, kings, and a lot of strong aces, stronger than he could have. So I'm going to go ahead actually and overbet my flush draw along with a lot of those strong hands. I'm going to go ahead and check and try to induce a bluff from this guy in the upper right-hand table rather than try to value bet my weak ace. Oh, and he moves all in into an $8 pot, so I can go ahead and fold that. That's going to be okay. And now over here on this, on the lower left-hand table, I don't want to check down 10 high. I'm going to go ahead and triple off. I'm not going to use the overbet. I want better blockers for the overbet, probably blocking ace-queen, ace-jack. Queen, yeah, I'd say queen-jack. Queen-jack, no spades is going to be the nut bluff hand for me there, and I could barrel a lot of those on the turn with the gut shot. I'm going to fold ace-jack to the 3x 3-bet. Want to call with the hands that have a lot more potential to make big hands, the suited connected cards, more so than the offsuit Broadways. I'm still going to be cautious with those, even against the smaller 3-bet sizes. Against the blind down, blind limper, we can go ahead and isolate with King 7 suited. And we can check. This guy we can pretty clearly tag as a recreational player at this point by limping the button. We're going to go ahead and check range to him. Against the limp re-raise with King 7, we can go ahead and let it go. And I just got tripling off. However, this card has a decent bit of backdoor equity, so if I still want to have some check raises at those flop stabs that are probably not that strong, I think that's a reasonable hand to do it with. Haven't hit the 9. I want to continue barreling just because it's the 9 of spades and I picked up the flush draw. I don't want to start checking the jack high, no showdown value with this much equity, so I want to keep barreling. He basically looks like he just floated me once because he doesn't really believe me very much right now after the triple off. But when I continued in the turn, he folded right away, so he clearly wasn't too strong. But when I pick up the equity, I think I've got to keep barreling. If I just turn a blank where it doesn't do anything for me, I can go ahead and check fold and know that my flop check raise by itself was most likely profitable as it was, and there's a chance to pick up some barrel cards too. Lower right-hand table, we're opening pocket 10s, blind down blind. We get flatted, and we're going to check range to the big blind on the ace queen two-tone board. We're going to fold King 10 in the upper left-hand table against the 3x open. I'm going to keep checking my 10s. There's really not a whole lot of bad cards for it. I guess jacks and kings without the spade hurt a little bit, but even those don't seem to be that damning. I'm going to go ahead and check call it once. I'm going to check one more time. We're going to open 9-6 on the button, the 9-6 suited in the lower left-hand table. We're going to open Queen 8 of clubs, a Queen 8 suited in the lower left-hand table. We get led into by a short stack. We've got no equity. He leads into us for pot. Just instantly going to fold that hand. The smaller sizes are weaker. So the smaller sizes give us more of a decision to float or bluff raise or something like that. But when he bets pot into me like that, when a recreational player donks into you for pot, don't expect to be folding him off too many hands by raising. So just raise your top pairs and better to get them in, and otherwise don't tangle with them and try to get too cute. We'll open the 3s under the gun. That's looser than a solver would do, but I like to do it to keep the sets in my range as much as possible. We're going to go ahead and stab half pot on the upper left-hand table in the checked-in blind battle. We've got top pair. We're going to open the king-queen offsuit from under the gun on the upper right-hand table. We're going to check range in the lower left-hand table, multi-way, especially with that fish in the pot. Upper left-hand table, my plan for the hand is to check back and then either catch the bluff catch on the river or value bet to induce by under-repping the strength of my hand. I'm going to fold to that pot-sized bet with the 3s. On the upper right-hand table against the big blind squeeze, I'm going to go ahead and fold my king-queen offsuit. The big blind shouldn't be too active in that spot. I'm going to go ahead and fold pretty liberally, especially with the player behind that could also go ahead and cold call. I'd probably be willing to 4-bet, pretty much all my queens plus ace-king to get them in, but I don't think I'd go any wider than that. I wouldn't call very much. Then we've got Queen Jack suited in the lower left-hand table against a player who seems like a wreck. We've been tangling with him a bit. I'm going to 3-bet not quite as tight as I otherwise would, given that recent history. But I am going to still 3-bet the Queen Jack suited. I'm going to 3-bet more like a 10-11% range instead of a 15% range here, especially because I'm not sure if he's opening the button quite wide enough or not. Not particularly sure. But just the mere fact that I think he's going to be folding to me a bit less in the 3-bet right there means I should probably play a bit tighter. We're going to open ace-deuce on the button with the dead small blind. We're going to defend pocket twos against the cutoff open and the button call. I'm not going to defend, or not going to call with 7-5 suited against the 3x open and call on the lower left-hand table, though. I'm going to range bet the upper right-hand table. We just hit our deuce. We're going to go ahead and start betting out, trying to get some money in this pot. Bet half pot. We'd probably be betting half pot with a lot of hands. The upper right-hand table is an overbet spot. We've got aces, kings, 8-9, ace-king, ace-9, ace-8, king-9, king-8, 8-9. A lot of those are 3-bet pre-flop or check raise on the flop for this guy, so I'm going to use the overbet or check options. I'm not going to overbet the ace-deuce. That's an ace to check back. I'm going to go ahead and bluff, catch, or value bet most rivers with this hand as well. When he checks, I'm going to go ahead and I would be bluffing with a lot of air that couldn't have bet the turn as well, that just doesn't have much showdown value. A hand like 5-4. Some of the gut shots, some of the Broadway gut shots that I didn't see bet the turn with, and of course the weak aces that I didn't bet, or any sneakily rivered 2-pair type hands. Going to open king-7 suited from the button in the upper right-hand table. Get an under the gun open to 5x because of that dead money poster out there. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to have a 3-bet range, but it's going to be so big it's going to be like a 4-bet or fold. And I'm going to be stacking off with queens plus ace king here. I can have quite a few 3-bet bluffs. King jack suited I think is going to be strong enough to be one of them, so we're going to go ahead and pop them up right there. We can have more than a 50-50 ratio of value to bluff with queens plus ace king being our value. We can probably even go something like 60-40 just because of the stack sizings that are out there. We hit a set again on the upper left-hand table, ace-7-3. We're going to go ahead and bet range. In the upper right-hand table, we're also going to go ahead and bet range against the one caller in position where we 3-bet. We hit top pair, so we're feeling pretty good about this hand and really can't talk ourselves out of continuing with it, even if he plays back. Now that said, let me see here. I think I want to continue betting most with hands like queens and kings. I can trap aces and jacks because it's the top overpair with no overcards or the set. I think I want to bet some of my jacks, but I think I want to maybe bet ace-jack. I want to check king-jack and queen-jack. You could bet this or check it. It's probably pretty close. I think it's right in the middle of what hand should be bet and what hand should be checked on this turn. He bets half pot. I really can't have any kind of a call fold range at this point here. So what I should be doing is I should be raising all in with all the hands I'm continuing. So that jacks that I trap with the aces, my ace-jack, my queen-jack type hands, I'm not really going to have bluffs. I can't believe I got a bluff through, or, not that that was a bluff, but I can't believe I got a check raise all in through there uncalled with how much money he had put in the pot. Yeah, but in that spot, mathematically speaking, I really can't have very many bluffs. I guess in theory, I could have a non-zero number of combos of bluffs that don't want to be called, but it's going to be very, very few because of the amount of money he's got left to call off in that pot. I think he only needs something like, what was it? It was 30 blinds into like 200. He only needs 15% equity to call off at that point. Like, he really shouldn't be folding very many hands, which means I shouldn't be bluffing very many hands. And we just won a very large portion of a stack without showdown, which makes me happy. Can fold king 4 in the lower left-hand table. Lower right-hand table against the limp and then the isolation. I'm not going to call too many hands for a 3x, or I'm going to be out of position to 2 players post-flop. I'm going to pop this up, to about 18, or I'm going to fold primarily. You might talk me into calling a few decent suited cards, big suited cards, not good enough to call, or not good enough to 3-bet. For the most part, I'm going to 3-bet or fold. I'm not even going to come along with king queen. I'm going to be a bit more cautious than that, given the way this hand is starting to develop. I don't think this guy is particularly weak for isolating a fish that's 50 blinds deep. I can be stacking off against him in that spot pre-flop with queens plus ace king, or maybe jacks. Jacks are kind of close. And I should mix in some bluffs with my 3-bets there. Some, maybe a pair or two that's not quite good enough to call off, and some suited Broadway cards that can either flop a good top pair, a very high top pair, or flop a large draw with a lot of equity that I can go in there and tangle with. Those are the hands I'm looking for to raise in that situation pre-flop. And king queen off just doesn't have quite enough equity there to do it. Jack 10 suited against an under the gun open is fairly close between a 3-bet and a cold, a 3-bet and a fold. I typically err towards folding it. If I thought this guy was particularly loose, I might 3-bet him with it. I'm just going to err on the side of caution and fold though. But it's pretty close. It's just outside the range of hands I would typically 3-bet with as a standard there. Going to open ace-5 suited on the cutoff in the lower right-hand table. Suspected recreational player with a half stack, but he uses a reg type sizing, opens 2.5x on the button. We've got ace-9 suited. Against a reg full stack, we might 3-bet this, but I don't want to raise fold this hand because I'm going to be raise folding too many hands if I do. So I'm just going to go ahead and flat call that. Going to go ahead and range bet the 10-4 deuce two-tone flop in the lower right-hand table. I'm going to actually donk into him small here with the ace-9. See if he's got a hand that can even call 1-bet on the upper left-hand table. That probe is overfolded for pretty much all sizes, but the small size in particular. It's also under raised, so it's a pretty good thing to jab at the pool with. Here we face a 3-bet. We've got a gut shot, the backdoor nut flush draw, an ace high and an overcard. I think that's a very reasonable hand to continue with. We should still be continuing pretty widely against that size check raise. Not quite as wide as a half pot one, but we can still continue a lot of hands. We would have continued had we hit the nuts, hit the ace, or hit a flush draw. I think I can go ahead and fold this particular gut shot though. And over in the lower left-hand table, we're going to go ahead and 3-bet the 10-jacks, not 10-9 suited against the button open. Once again, I'm going to be a bit tighter than I typically would against that guy because I think I've tangled with him a bit and he might be suspicious of me. Although maybe not because he folded instantly the last couple of times I did that, so maybe I was being too cautious. But even if I'm right to be cautious, I should still be 3-betting the 10-9 suited in that particular position. So I don't know that any decision changed with the actual hands that we were holding. Lower left-hand table, we're going to open king, queen suited in the cutoff. We're going to use a roughly 28% range. Blind on blind, lower right-hand table, we're going to be 3-betting aggressively, maybe upper teens, 17, 18%. We're, of course, going to 3-bet queens and going to get this in against a 4-bet. Although I guess I'm not sure if I would flat the 4-bet and play in position or just jam back. I'm pretty sure I would just jam it all in at that point. I would have to think about it. Lower left-hand table, we're going to go ahead and range bet on the king 9-9 two-tone board against the small blind caller, which means we should be thinking about his range as a little different than we would against a standard big blind caller. He's full stacked. He's played 15% of hands over his first couple of orbits. He seems like a reg, so it's pretty safe to put him on a very specific narrow range in this particular situation. That range should be, middling pairs. And probably some suited broadways in there. He could have some trips. He could have some kings, king X, which I'm beating. And he could also have some pocket pairs, especially with a heart. I'm going to go ahead and bet this because I think I can get value from a worse king. I can get value from king jack, king 10, as much as I'm worried about 9s or 7s full or something like that. And I also don't want to give free equity if he's got some goofy hand like 8-8 with a heart, to draw to that for free. I want to go ahead and charge that hand if it wants to come along. So that's why I opted to bet. When I'm betting weaker, more marginal hands, I'm not polarizing. Not that the top pair is weak, but it's not a real polarized betting range. I don't want to use the overbet. I use the smaller size. Now, especially with that 10 hitting the range, it completes some straights. It makes king 10 a better hand. I'm happy to go ahead and check this back. Lower right-hand table, I'm going to check range out of position with the ace-7. Upper right-hand table, I'm going to go ahead and start betting at this now. I've still got overcards. I got some removal of the top pair. And I'm actually, let me see, the lower right-hand table, I would be betting, I bet my 4s, my jacks, my 9s. I would start betting aces, the top side as well at this point. And I can have, all forms of aces up. You could have I can have ace jack suited and offsuit. I can have ace 9 suited and offsuit. I've got lots of good hands here, and my one pair hands, I'm not going to bet too many one pair hands than that, maybe ace king, ace queen. So I'm actually going to go ahead and check this again, use a more polarized range, under-rep my hand, look to get him to start bluffing, give him a second chance to do it, or under-rep my hand enough where I can go ahead and call, get him to call me with something weak on the river. I'm going to go ahead and check, or call rather, and then check on the river. Now he bets, about a 70% bet. I'm going to take a look at some MDA, but I'm pretty sure I'm just going to call this rather, as my plan was all along. But I want to take a look at some MDA real quick and take a look if that impacts anything. 70% bet is slightly underbluffed. The check bet line is ever so slightly overbluffed. And the flush closing river is a little bit underbluffed as well. This is actually closer to a call or a fold than I wanted to give it credit for up front, but I'm still going to go ahead and call with it, especially with him being an aggressive player. Oh, and he rivered the deuces, which is a shame, but I think my plan on the turn was pretty reasonable. It got him to start betting a hand that I was ahead of and was drawing very, very thin. And on that hand, we were also playing against the small blind where we put him on a very specific range because he's a reg-type player calling from the small blind. Stopping and thinking about that gave us a chance to go ahead and value bet that one kicker worse hand on the turn, one of those hands in the range we were targeting and specifically thinking about. So you want to stop and think not just about what hands you have, but what hands they have you can both get value from and deny equity from, or you want to be thinking about denying equity from. When you go ahead and decide what size you want to bet and what kind of range construction you want to use. I've got the low end to the gut shot that also makes the nut gut shot with Jack 10, no backdoor flush draw. He's betting, 2/3 of the pot, 3/4 of the pot. I'm just going to go ahead and check fold it. On the button against the cutoff 2.5x open, I'm going to go ahead and 3-bet with the ace-4 suited. Upper left-hand table, we're going to open 10-9 on the button. Jack 8-3 with both the small blind and big blind coming along. We've got the open-ender, so that's a fine hand to continuation, but we're not going to range bet multi-way. We're going to polarize our range a lot more, though I still do like using the small size on the flop. Now, if this small blind is also a reg-type player, he could be trapping with a hand like 8s or 3s here very easily, or he could also have a hand like some kind of Jack X. We get raised by the big blind a pretty healthy size. It's about 80%. Given that I've got the open-ender that I'm in position, there's still plenty of money behind. I've got to go ahead and call this, but I think I'm going to call my entire continue range. You know, if I've got Jacks, 8s, or 3s here, Jack 8, I'm going to go ahead and call. Where this gets kind of tricky is what I do with a good single pair hand. I think I still have to call with all the overpairs and ace-jack or better. So the small blind calls, and we just hit our gin card on the turn, which is great. Everyone checks to us. I think I want to use a small turn size bet. That would get that pot up to about 80. I'd be left with about 110, 112 left behind. I could overbet that all in against the small blind or bet a more reasonable size all in against the big blind. If he's got any kind of decent piece, he really can't consider folding. We had him to check raise us all in. We're going to go ahead and call off with the nuts. We're against 3s, and we stack them. We get bet into min bet. We don't have any backdoor flush draws over here, but that min bet from a fish player who's playing 27 blinds deep is probably going to be so weak that we have some ability to float, especially if he shows further weakness on the turn. The quick pot size bet on the turn does not make me think he's weak, and we didn't, hit our miracle king or anything like that, so it's just time to go ahead and fold. A little bit more about that 10-9 straight hand over there. When we get check raised by the big blind after the small blind already called, when we bet out multi-way, and then there's a caller, and then the guy squeezes over the top with the raise, and he uses a pretty good size raise. It was about an 80% of pot raise after taking the calls into account. We can, we can't completely eliminate bluffs from his range, of course, never entirely, but we can be pretty comfortable that that range is going to be a lot less bluff heavy and a lot more nut and value heavy than a lot of ranges otherwise would be, just given the multi-way action and then the overcaller of the flop C bet. So we should probably also be a bit cautious with how much we continue with the one pair hands. I was thinking about that early on when I was discussing what range we would continue with against the check raise on the flop, and I was initially saying folding the one pair hands is too nitty, and in general it is. The over pairs I think I would have to come along with just because he could really have a hand like ace-jack that he's doing that with, that we just have absolutely crushed. I might even be talked into calling with some of my jacks, ace-jack, but I think if I've got a marginal top pair of jacks that I bet the flop with, because some of those would actually check multi-way, I think I can talk myself into folding the flop, folding on the early side, a bit on the tight side, just because I'm pretty sure his range is going to be awfully tight there when he does that. Lower left-hand table, we're going to open jacks, blind on blind. Upper right-hand table, 9-5 suited is kind of on the cusp of what we would open. I'm going to go ahead and open it because this guy's been a bit fishy. He's been a bit wacky and aggressive, so if you wanted to fold it a little bit tighter because of that, I would hear it. But you might also get him doing something really stupid when you flop a sneaky two-pair or something at the same time. So I think you should probably get in there with the hand just when the guy's been a poor player. Lower left-hand table, Jack 4 suited, we open on the button. The upper right-hand table, we've got a gut shot, a backdoor flush draw. This guy's probably got all kinds of nonsense in his range he stabs with. No real showdown value, but lots of equity, or some backdoor equity to go with our gut shot at least. I'm going to go ahead and put a check raise in. That's a good card, and that we now have a double gutter and a flush draw, so we're going to go ahead and keep betting. Other than hitting the 8, that's pretty much the best card we could have asked for in the deck. I'm going to use that 70%, 2/3 type pot size here to keep barreling, and we fold them off with the continued aggression. A player like that, given that he's been wacky and spazzy, and that's a line that's not very heavily overfolded, when you check raise and triple off, I mean, it's still folded. It's still not the worst thing in the world to bluff there. It's not just like a slam dunk loser for to barrel off in that line, but it's more marginal than a lot of other spots. So given that this guy's also been wacky and is liable to do almost anything, I think I would probably just give up the river with 9 high, as strange as that sounds to say. Because it's not something I would be usually doing in very many spots. But against a player I think is just going to be too prone to call me or click buttons or do all kinds of weird, wacky stuff, I'm going to, play in a smart, balanced fashion on the earlier streets, check raise him where I think he might be too wide and too weak and where I've got some equity where I can pick up, or we'll keep barreling the backdoor equity like I did. But if it bricks out and he's been coming along, I'm not going to get crazy and go ahead and overbet jam the river or anything like that. I'm probably just going to go ahead and give up against a player that, just calls way too often. The only exception is going to be if I've got a very low draw and the board is also very draw heavy and there's a ton of draws he could legitimately have. But I think a lot of times I'll actually just surrender against a guy like that in that line. Lower left-hand table, we open threes. Under the gun, got called by the big blind on 10-4-4. That's a pretty clean board for the threes. We want to go ahead and bet small. Middle position, open 2.5x. Ace-7 suited is just a little bit too loose, too weak to 3-bet with. Ace-7 should be one of the suited aces you're least inclined to 3-bet with. Ace-10 or better is going to be better, and the suited wheel ace are going to be better because they've got more playability post-flop. And so it's probably the second worst suited ace to 3-bet with after only Ace-6. So 3-betting that means you're 3-betting pretty much all your suited aces, along with everything else you want to 3-bet there. I think it's just too many hands to do against a middle position player. Fold 8-9 suited under the gun, but we'll raise Ace-5 suited. 9-8 suited is fairly close. If you opened it under the gun, I wouldn't have a major problem with it. It's probably just outside my standard under the gun range. Lower right-hand table, we've got Ace-King suited on the button. We're going to go ahead and open that. That lower right-hand table also doesn't look very enticing, so we're going to go ahead and work on swapping that out. Upper right-hand table has the guy who's been a bit wacky, so we want to stay. Nobody else looks too blatantly fishy. This one player has been calling a lot more than I would necessarily recommend. Upper left, but other than that, we're really just there because of the spazzy player. Upper left-hand table, we just checked in. We're going to go ahead and tag that button limper as a rec. Probably nobody else on that table. Even the lower left table is not great. These three guys all look pretty reggy based on their stats so far. Let me get a bet and then a check raise. I was planning to check raise this actually myself. Most likely, yeah, I would have check raised had the small blind folded just because I've got a gut shot. I don't want to be calling with 4 high. And he might have a lot of nonsense that folds in his, button limping range, which, yeah, he instantly folded to the small blind's check raise. So I think that's a reasonable plan. But when the small blind already check raises, nothing else I can do. Can't call. Really can't call much of anything. Don't want to be 4-betting. Button opens for min raise. We're in the small blind. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet 9-8 suited. It's probably right around the bottom of our range. If you wanted to go ahead and fold it because this player might do something wacky and overcall you, or because there's less money in the pot from that small open, I wouldn't hate that either. Upper right-hand table, we're going to open Ace-Queen offsuit from the button. I I'd be expanding my range some, particularly with suited type cards, just because that small blind's in there, and the big blind's been pretty tight, passive, and nitty. So I think that's actually a very good spot to expand your range and play in position against a guy that's shown he'll 6x jam the turn, and other such silly things like that. I think he bet all in. You know, when I had 93 effective and doing an 8 blind pot at one point also. So being in hands in position with that guy seems like good business, especially when the big blind is tight, nitty, passive, hasn't 3-bet. New table, the lower left-hand table, we've got the cutoff opens to 3x. We've got ace-5 suited. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet him here. 3-betting probably about 10% of our range, including a couple suited wheel aces. Get the cutoff open. Looks to be a fairly standard reg, 22-16 over 71 hands. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet him pretty aggressively, probably about 13% of hands or so. Aces, of course, is going to be one of those. Not really cold calling, even on the button. And we'll open the cutoff on that upper right-hand table, this time with 10-7 suited. Towards the bottom of the open range, but still a fine hand to open. Lower left-hand table, we're going to open with the deuces on the button. Small blind goes ahead and 3-bets us from the button. Uses a very specific size, 10.9 blinds, but about 4x. I think we can go ahead and probably call pretty much all pairs in this position, this formation against that size. We're not going to expand with the Jack-6 on the button, and we're not going to expand with the King-7, which is slightly outside of standard open range for me in the upper left-hand table, just because those players don't seem particularly particularly tight fishy or passive. Against the C-bet, we're going to go ahead and fold the deuces, especially with no club, though I think I would probably fold them either way. The club probably is slightly more valuable to bluff on club runouts because you block ace-deuce of clubs, which should be in his range a decent bit of the time. But I don't know that you can really be continuing with deuces without having the set very much at all. Although I'm not sure, admittedly, I'm not sure that might be overfolding at the same time. It's possible a solver would call some of those hands. I'm not sure. I think they're probably pretty near the cutoff. Got a blind on blind situation in the upper right-hand table. We've got Queen 8. That's probably just outside a solver type open range. I'm going to go ahead and expand a little bit. This guy doesn't seem extremely loose. He seems a little bit tighter than typical, and he's probably not 3-betting the big blind enough. So we can go ahead and open a few more hands than we otherwise would. And I'm going to check range on the 7-3-4 board. I've been hitting the ace. I'm going to go ahead and start betting into him here, just because I don't want to be checking or check calling or anything like that. He's probably got a lot of weird weak hands. He could have an ace, of course, but that small turn bet is not handled well by the pool pretty much all over, in that it's overfolded. You know, even though it's not folded to a ton, it's folded to too much, and it's also under raised. So you can get away with using a lot more than you might otherwise think. We're going to defend blind on blind with ace-7 suited in the lower left table. Upper right table, we're going to open ace-jack on the button. We flop top pair, you know, weakish kicker, no backdoor draw, no reason to do anything but just call. I'm going to call pretty much all my continue range there for the first bet. I don't really have aces or jacks, or aces or queens rather, or ace-queen. I'm going to go ahead and range bet the upper right table, king 6-5, backdoor flush draw. I'm going to call with the ace for the second barrel as well. I guess the river becomes a little bit interesting for how often this guy bluffs if he barrels again. I'm going to open queen 10 suited in the upper left-hand table. You know, I could actually be sitting on real strong. I could be sitting on nuts here, even like king jack offsuit. So my range is protected, even if he does something wacky like overbet. He does a 1.5x pot bet on a triple barrel blind on blind. Let's see here. That in general is slightly overbluffed. The ace high. Well, the overbet is slightly overbluffed, but the triple barrel less so. Sizing up on the turn tells me a little bit less so. The ace high flop a little bit less so. I don't have good removal to the actual nut type hands. You know, the things I'd be thinking about bluff catching, which if I want to bluff catch here, are going to be hands like ace jack is going to be my nut bluff catcher. You know, for a one pair type hand. That's the one I'm most happy to call down with. I actually, you know, ace-7 doesn't dominate any value at that point. So that's, you know, that hand's a pure bluff catcher. So you know, he's not doing that with the weaker ace, where I can actually snap him off. You know, he's not doing that with second pair with queen king for value. You know, if he's doing that, he's trying to get me to fold. So what that tells me is that if ace-7 suited is only a bluff catcher in that spot, it's actually a less good bluff catcher than probably a hand like queen jack, because it blocks a set of queens. It blocks a set of queens, and it blocks the Broadway straight as well. So I think if that's a fine hand to fold there, I also think that line is probably a little bit underbluffed, at least on that particular texture. And I also, like I said, could have some real strong hands there to call with them, and I could be trapping with the nuts all day long as played. Lower left-hand table, we're going to go ahead and check range out of position. That's our buddy who's been a bit wacky so far. So we're going to go ahead and check call once with overcards that pivot to the straight draw, the backdoor flush draw. I'm going to fold Jack-9 against the undergun open in the lower left-hand table. And now against the bet check line, we just got to go ahead and bluff off with king high. Got good removal of those pairs that might call. Plus, just we don't beat anything. He can have weird stuff that's going to fold. He can have pairs that won't call us down, though. Especially when he checks the turn, I think we can discount at least a decent number of his top pair hands when he doesn't keep betting. So we're really mostly worried about getting called down by a weak jack that checks back the turn, which, like I said, is probably a small percentage of his jacks, or a 10 that he spikes on the turn, stops betting because he realizes it's second pair. I think bluff in that situation is real good, just even in a vacuum. Aside from the fact that line is a good line to bluff in anyway for the most part, and that you can't show down king high to win. Small blind facing a button open. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet pretty aggressively, something like a 15% range. You can 3-bet hands like sixes, maybe even pocket fives. Lower right-hand table, a 2.5x button open. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet that aggressively as well, probably about 14%, something like that. King 10 suited is going to be part of that. Probably 8s are better, suited broadways, some suited connectors, some suited 8s and 9s, a few suited wheel aces, and then like ace jack, ace queen, ace king, king queen. A range like that's a pretty reasonable range to 3-bet against a button open. Small blind versus big blind battle, facing a 3x raise first in. This hand's probably a little outside of the range I would defend with, or even 3-bet with. I'll 3-bet a few junky offsuit hands that aren't quite good enough to call, just so I've got a smattering of hands all over in that blind versus blind spot. Probably not 7-5. Maybe that's a little bit too weak, or that should be continuing a little bit too much. That player maybe has been a bit on the passive side so far as well. I guess it's too early to really say that for sure. But if anything, I'm going to err on the side of being tighter, not looser. And I probably already fold 7-5 more often than not in that spot, though it admittedly is pretty close against a regular type player. Going to fold the 6s in the cutoff against or versus the cutoff open for 3x from the small blind. Here's a spot where I'm actually going to go ahead and call the small blind just because there's a 3x open from under the gun, might be strong, and a player who's probably pretty weak playing a lot of hands and calling in middle position when you really shouldn't be doing that with much of anything. Just got to get past the big blind and hope he doesn't squeeze. He's probably not going to be excessively squeeze happy against an under the gun open. So I'm going to sneak in with my 3s and try to hit some kind of sneaky third 3. Now I'm going to go ahead and start stabbing this just because when nobody shows any initiative on the flop, a lot of times nobody really wants to pot that bad. So I'm going to go ahead and try to take this pot down with a turn barrel and a river barrel, as a matter of fact. And actually, now that river came in queen, I think I can fold him off pretty much all non-queens with an overbet. So I'm going to use the overbet size here as opposed to the 2/3 that I think gets heroed a ton by hands like Jack X. Upper right-hand table, a presumably recreational type player donks into me for a large sizing on the flop. I've got 8s on a 10-7-4 flop. I'm not going anywhere for one donk bet. That's not a great card on the turn. If he donk bets again large, I'm probably going to get out of the way. But the larger flop sizing makes me a bit more suspicious. Yeah, if he continues betting, I mean, I would continue calling on the cards that were good for my hand. Like 9s, 6s, 8s, probably like even jacks, and then like the lower cards for my 8s still feel pretty strong. I'd probably call that down another time. But here with the queen peeling, now his random overcards that were just nonsense on the flop that he bet because that's what he does. He just clicks buttons. Now those actually have a pair. So I think it's fine to fold the 8s on the turn versus the bad cards, but continue on the good cards. I could also be floating that flop with overcards and flush draw, backdoor flush draw kind of hands. Upper left-hand table, we're going to open Queen Jack from the cutoff. We called that min 3-bet over here on the lower left-hand table and flop top pair. No choice but to call that. If he continues barreling strong, I don't feel great about this hand, believe it or not, just because I've so easily dominated and I don't have any kind of equity to back me up, if my king is behind. So I'm actually going to go ahead and make an extremely tight fold just because I'm not giving him credit for min-raising pre-flop, then betting strong sizes on the flop and the turn with a bunch of bluffs on the board like that. And even the bluffs he does have a ton of equity. They've got, it's like ace high gut shots with overcards or flush draw hands, pair plus draw kind of things. And that can get in the bad spot on the river where I may have to call another large bet with a hand that was perhaps always in bad shape or drawing dead. So I'm actually going to go ahead and, at this point I already did and I'm still talking about it, but what I was deciding to do was just go ahead and fold that perhaps a street too early rather than get myself roped into a situation that is probably pretty marginal at best. I don't have specific data at my hands for how players triple barrel in the 3-bet pot. Although in general, I don't think it's particularly weak. And I also don't know what to make of that min raise click back because it's such a weird screwy play you should never make and you see so infrequently. Who the hell knows what that means or how often it's weak or how often it's strong. So when I don't know, I'm just going to err on the side of caution and take the 0 EV. Blind on blind over here, I'm going to 3-bet a lot of suited connectors like ace-7 suited. So this one is obviously going to get done. I'm gonna 3-bet. Like pair is probably 9 or better, and then a lot of the suited connectors down lower than that. So I've got some board coverage when I 3-bet in that spot on almost every card, every run out. I'll also 3-bet the suited Broadway cards. Ace King, Ace Queen, and then a smattering of just random junky suited and offsuit hands around the edges of what I call it, just so I've got stuff all over the place. I'm going to go ahead and 3-bet the under the gun open with my ace king suited in the upper right hand table, and I've got a recreational player with a short stack limping under the gun on the lower left hand table, so I'm going to go ahead and isolate him for pot with my 8s. We get 4-bet. We've been very active on this table and could have been, be inducing some light 4-bets or some legitimate 4-bet bluffs. There's just no reason to really think I want to fold ace king anyway for only a little over 100 blinds anyway, even from an under the gun formation. It's not a hand I really want to fold a ton. We got it in against ace king offsuit, so we got it in 50-50. But unless I think a guy is particularly tight or I've got some kind of image where I'm perceived as having no 3-bets, I, for whatever reason, haven't 3-bet like 30 or 40 hands at the table, and people aren't going to 4-bet me bluff or think I'm 3-betting light, maybe then you can talk me out of putting them squarely on a value range that's particularly tight with very few, if any, bluffs. But in general, I'm not folding ace-king offsuit for 100-ish blinds, in a 3-bet pot. I don't care the formation. I'm just going to get it in pre-flop. Lower left-hand table, we checked range after isolating the pre-flop limper. It checks around. I want to go ahead and get some value from worse hands and also protect my equity against weird random overcards and ace-high type hands that are in there. To me, the only question now is can I get enough value from this guy to go ahead and put him all in with the 8s and hope he's not on some kind of 9x hand. I think we can probably get hero called by enough stupid one-pair hands that aren't 9x or better, that we can go ahead and do this against a guy that's this short. And it's okay to value cut ourselves sometimes too. We're supposed to be. So I think I want to be value betting then and putting this all in. Plus it gives my weird random overcard bluffs some more teeth and I actually have some thin mergy value in there too. If I've got like Jack 10 or some kind of random spade draw, I've got to bluff that off on the river too. And if I'm only bluffing a very limited, or if I'm only betting a very limited value range, the guys that figure out to call me are just going to be printing money against me right there. So I do want to have those mergier hands in there if they can legitimately value bet, and I think that was a good spot to do it. Going to fold against the in position 3x, 3-bet with king 8 suited. That's that guy that's been wacky some post flop, so we want to be in there, but not at the expense of calling pretty healthy size 3-bets when we're out of position with very marginal hands. You still want to be playing fundamentally sound and getting into pots with them at the right time with the kind of hands that can actually crack them. Against the cutoff open and the small blind overcall with 10 deuce offsuit, just not even close. Just go ahead and fold that. There's no reason to come along and call. Blind down blind, 3x open. We got king 9 offsuit. That's a fine hand to defend with. Very clearly in the call range. Definitely shouldn't be folding, definitely shouldn't be 3-betting. Calling is clearly best with that hand. We flop top pair, no club on a monotone board and pretty coordinated as well. We're going to go ahead and stab half pot against his check. Upper left-hand table, we're going to go ahead and 3-bet large, treat it almost like a 4-bet or fold situation. We're going to stack off with queens plus ace king, but we can have a lot of hands that actually raise fold here against some kind of jam, just because we're not going to have that much money in there relative to how deep their playback is going to be. But we probably don't want to play for stacks with ace-jack there at the same time, at least not pre-flop. On the flop, we're going to go ahead and bet out pretty heavily. Or, I'm sorry, not bet out pretty heavily, but bet out pretty frequently with our range, because we've got a lot of overpairs and overcards, a lot of them with the flush draw, or at least a backdoor flush draw. That's a nice blanky turn card, so we want to go ahead and continue betting. I actually think we want to play a jam or check range at this point. He's got 78 effective behind. There's 57 in there. We can jam our overpairs that are vulnerable, and we can also jam our flush draws, which we have quite a few of, 7 flush draws. We can go ahead and jam all of those as well, along with the jacks. We could even get called by a hand like 10s or 9s here. Trying to think if I really want to trap. I feel like when I check on that board, it's almost a pure surrender. I don't want to check flush draws. I really don't want to check any one pair hands. I don't have any sets. I don't have any straights. Down here, after the flop checks through and now it checks to us, we're going to go ahead and bet half pot on the turn, especially having picked up the flush draw. The upper left-hand table against the 3x middle position up, we're going to go ahead and defend with 6-4 suited. It's near the bottom of our defense range. Lower left-hand table, we can open ace-4 offsuit on the button. And we got check raised on the small side, which does not inherently denote strength to me, by our guy who's been wacky and clicking buttons while we have the nut flush draw getting 4-1. It's a clear call. Check fold on the upper left-hand table with 6-high backdoor flush draw on a coordinated Broadway board. This stuff all seems pretty straightforward right here. On the river, I wouldn't be surprised if he does something crazy. You know, if he goes nuts and jam and I happen to flop that flush, I'm going with it. If he bet that size and I rivered the flush, I'm going to go ahead and raise them all in. So I'm looking to get in there. I'm not that worried about the board being paired and him showing up with the full house every so often, because he's going to spaz on me with all kinds of silly hands, I'm pretty sure, and he's also going to stack off with worse. So I'm happy to play for stacks if I can make a flush against that guy, even with the board paired. Upper right-hand table, we're going to keep betting on that flop after raising pre-flop with the 8-8 suited in the cutoff. A Jack-3 deuce flop is a good flop to range bet. The 10 turn is not great for us. However, he bets half pot. We're pretty sure this guy is fishy, which already makes us want to stay in the pot. I'm not necessarily convinced that he's got a better hand than us just because he does that also. So we're going to go ahead and call. That's a pretty good river for us as well. Going to take a look at some MDA. Lower left-hand table, or lower right-hand table, we're going to start jabbing. Just trying to decide what we would do if this guy bet into us again on the river. But we're just going to go ahead and check back when he lets us check. He really should have bet again with that hand where he can't rep very much. Instead of expecting me to bluff, I'm probably checking back a ton of hands. I probably am short on hands that are pure bluffs in those spots. I don't like his river trap at all. Upper right-hand table, we're going to go ahead and isolation raise over that short stack that posted in the cutoff. And we're going to go ahead and we open 10-jack suited in the lower left-hand table from under the gun. But we're going to fold it against a 3.5x in position raise. I think it's okay to be extremely tight against those as long as you're four-betting the correct hands and frequencies. And it's very hard to play out of position against a range that's probably not all that weak. Under the gun players aren't being 3-bet all that widely, nor should they be 3-bet all that widely, honestly. It really should only be something like a 7 or 8% range to begin with. And the pool's not even finding that entirely against under the gun opens. So it's still okay to go ahead and be very, very cautious against those. There's a few hands you have to call just so you really can't be exploited because they'll still play okay post-flop. But you actually can fold a lot of those, you know, even more marginal or smaller suited Broadway hands and still be okay. Especially against a 3.5x sizing where the pot odds start getting less good. Going to fold against even the min raise from the small blind in that lower right-hand table, but we are going to steal blind on blind with queen deuce suited in the lower left-hand table. Going to instantly fold against that 3-bet. Upper right-hand table, we're going to go ahead and raise up the under the gun limper. I think that might be that player that's been doing some tricky trappy stuff. I'm not 100% sure. No, he's played 100 hands, so he's been here for a while. I think it is that same guy. The tables shuffle around some on ignition with Table Tamer keeping them aligned every time I pop a new one in, so I'm not 100% sure. But I had that guy tagged as special, and he was sitting in that seat. He's been here 100 hands, so he's been here the whole time. I'm pretty sure that's him. So I want to be a little bit more careful with his limp re-raise stuff that goes on than I would against the typical limper, but probably not going to start making real drastic changes unless he gets me a few times. Just something I'm trying to be aware of, not something I'm necessarily adjusting to right off the bat. Lower left-hand table, we got a caller from the big blind on queen 8-5 rainbow. We're going to go ahead and range bet. Particularly happy to bet with our bottom set hand. If you wanted to size up, I don't hate that either. Turn is interesting in that it makes Jack 10 and 6-7 both get there. We've got queens, 8s, 9s, and all the combos of Jack 10, including Jack 10 offsuit. We got queens, 9s, 8s, 5s, queen 9 suited, queen 8 suited, 9-8 suited, and a lot of one pair hands as well that still want to bet for protection against these queen jack type hands, queen 10 type hands. My overpairs and better queens want to keep betting too. So I'm actually going to use a smaller bet size here. I think he can have all the jack 10 I can have. I think he can have all the 6-7 I can have. He probably does. He really shouldn't be having queens, but he could play nines that way and not 3-bet him pre-flop. He could also even be trapping with 8s or 5s on the monotone flop that's not that connected until the 9 happens to hit. So there's reasons to think he might be a bit more nutty than a player usually is after check calling. River is a third spade and straights are out there. I don't want to go too crazy and overbet and force him to only call me down with backdoor flushes and trap straights or maybe even just got a higher set. I want to let him call me with his queen 10 nonsense that came along for all these bets, and I can milk him for one more. So I'm going to use the 2/3 sizing here. If I hit a backdoor flush, if I stumbled into the ace high flush, maybe I might go ahead and jam that all in or something like that. Or if I had the straight, especially with a good blocker to the flush, I might consider overbetting that. But with bottom set at that point where I'm worried about straights and backdoor flushes, and I just want to milk one more bet out of a top pair type hand or a second pair with a blocker hand that just doesn't want to go away. I want to make it easy for him to call and give me that last bet. So that's why I'm using the smaller size there and not the overbet. I want to take a look at what he called me with as well. We're going to go ahead and range bet after ISOing up over here with a6 against the 3x, the 3.2x, and then the click back double from the spazzy button or the weird button. I'm going to go ahead and fold the big blind with Jack 9. I'm going to fold against the button min raise, and I'm going to shuffle out this table on the lower right-hand side as well. As, it looks like our buddy might be sitting out. $57.7 with a bunch of limps can clearly go ahead and be tagged. 2.5x open. We're on the big blind with 9-7 suited. Going to 3-bet some suited connectors, but mostly call the one gappers. I don't want to start 3-betting too many speculative hands like that. King Jack, you could possibly 3-bet from the small blind. I mostly just fold it when the button opens on the upper right-hand table. I think I actually have to float a ton of hands here just because I can't only be calling with aces or pairs. So the hands I want to be floating with, they're all kinds of random backdoor flush draws. I'm going to go ahead and float him one time and look to sort of bluff him off on the river when he checks down. Or hit a 9 and, potentially value bet or bluff catch with it. Okay, and I don't think I really want to overbet here. Although I guess I could have ace five, ace deuce, deuces, or fives, and this is about my weakest possible hand. I'm going to go ahead and use the overbet. Nah, I'm just going to use the 2/3. I don't know that he's not trapping with the weak ace. Could go either way. Just play this hand to bluff the way I did right there. Yeah, ace seven. It's played entirely reasonably if you ask me. I like him checking back a decent number of aces on that turn to induce the bluff. But because he can and should be playing aces like that, and it's not that difficult to expect a reg type player on the button to play his weak aces like that, I don't want to assume that he can't have a good trip aces hand to calm me down with and just start going crazy happy with overbet bluffs in that line. I do want to overbet bluff if I happen to, have a slow play deuces, or I made a full house somehow kind of thing to force his trips to pay me off big, because I think trips are not going to fold regardless of the bet size. But because I'm worried he might have a decent number of them, I don't want to go too nuts and start overbetting, bluffing into him like crazy and just let his trips pay off and become very profitable. Face this weird, very, very small, like 2.5x out of position 3-bet from a fishy player. We've got ace-queen, so I think the only move is just go ahead and call. I guess you could talk me into jamming over the top of him pre-flop as well. In fact, that might actually be better. Against the bet for 2/3 there on that low raggy board that paired up, I think we got a fold. I can call against this bet here one time and see what he has. I can probably even bluff, especially on that river if he checks, because I've got such good removal to ace king and king queen, aces and queens. His best possible one pair hands for the most part at this point. So I can go ahead and fold that now. I think the only other way to play that ace-queen hand would be to jam back at him pre-flop, which in hindsight I think might have actually been the better play, because he's probably got stupid hands in his range. I'm not going to be dominated when he calls me off all that often by queens plus ace-king. He might call me with some worse aces where I dominate him. Yeah, actually I think jamming back is a much better play than calling in hindsight. Got a double barrel here in that limp pot from a player. Completed a small blind. His stats aren't that fishy, but he's playing short. He's playing reasonably aggressive. And I'll check down now gladly. He had the better 4. Oh well. I don't want to be getting too nitty and just folding hands that solver definitely is going to call there just against that bet. If I fold that, I'm just letting them fold out way too much in my range at that point. So I think it's okay to continue. Against this particular guy, I'm going to be content to stack off with certainly at least jacks. I think I'm even going to stack off with 10s against this guy because he's short. I'm going to pop up and play a 3-better fold strategy and plan that he's going to just go all in, go all in or call, not 4-bet me small. And probably have a bluffing ratio, of about 50-50 bluff hands to value hands there to go with my 10s plus ace king that I'm looking to stack off with. So it'll probably get me to raise fold some hands like ace queen and some suited Broadway cards. Queen 3 of diamonds is probably a little too loose to isolate against the limper. In hindsight, maybe it would have been fine to do it a bit more because he's playing 53-5 with 70% limps. He's probably going to play really poorly post-flop as well, and that hand can make some nice big flushes in position where I have a chance to cooler him or just make a big hand when he won't fold. So in hindsight, I actually think I probably should have isolated with that hand. Can open queen-jack offsuit from the upper right-hand table's middle position. Not going to pass on isoing this time, though, from the cutoff with ace-king, so we go ahead and raise that up. Lower left-hand table, you can just fold 6-5 suited on the button. I guess in theory that's a 3-bet in some cases by solvers. I usually just push my range up more linear and don't even have some of those real small suited connectors in there, but I guess you could mix them in if you like. Against that min raise in position with queen-jack, we need to just be calling. And I actually don't want to start stabbing against a guy who min 3-bet me and is very, very short. I'm actually only going to wait to the river to bluff at him. The river, it's a mandatory bluff with queen high. But I don't give him credit for not having an overpair he got weird and cute and trappy with, or for just not deciding he's not going to fold ace king, ace queen. Now I think the only decision is all in or check here. This is pretty good because it blocks a hand like jack 10, queen 10, so I want to go ahead and use that as my all-in bluff, like if I had a 10 or jack 10. He just doesn't seem very strong here. I guess he could have a few 10s he just checked down and stumbled into, but I think by and large I'm going to fold him off ace high, king high type hands, or maybe even some weird pair hands. And I don't want to be using the small size on that board because I'm pretty much betting 10x, jack 10, or bluffs. So there's no reason to bet small. I may as well polarize because I've got nuts or air. Upper left-hand table, we open ace 10 suited from the button. Get 3-bet in position by a player that has not 3-bet us yet in 21 opportunities, 61 total hands, and then we get called out of position by this special fishy player. I was going to fold ace-10 suited in position, especially once I saw the guy hasn't 3-bet yet, and then especially with an overcaller even more so, I'd be even more inclined to fold more hands. But because this guy is probably such a weak player, and I've got a hand that plays so well against a weak player in position, I'm actually going to go ahead and call this. Not to try to go against this player unless I really just cooler him, but really because I'm looking to make a hand against this player over here. And I think this guy will actually play pretty transparently in a three-way 3-bet pot, especially with the fishy type player out there. And against that little 6 into 26, I think we have to go ahead and call this. I'm not expecting him to raise too much unless he has specifically jack-jack. Maybe you could mix in a few bluffs, but I'm not that worried about it. And I want to get a chance to get to the river against this guy and maybe hit my gut shot, maybe hit my ace, or maybe get a chance to bluff him. 3-2-2, and we check range, and he min bets. We can call with king high, not even necessarily worried that he has us beat. He bets 10 into 40 for that size. We're obviously never considering folding, and quite honestly, I don't think there's a whole lot of merit in raising with the relatively weak ace, all things considered. A one-pair hand, we don't even block a flush when the flush and Broadway straight are possible. I'm going to try to show down with king high over here, and I'm just going to call down with my ace. And I ran into ace-king, which is a shame, but I don't have a major problem with getting in there and try to play against that guy like that. Okay, we have a fishy player who called in position with presumably a wide range. He's been very, very stabby on the flop. We've got a double-paired board with king high, which actually is relatively strong on the double-paired board. And I want to take a look at some MDA and see for sure, but I'm pretty sure this is supposed to be a call. Let's see here. It's pretty bluffy. A bet check bet line, even more bluffy. I mean, paired rivers trend bluffy. Paired flops not necessarily, but I've seen enough. I'm calling with king high. Oh, and ran into underfull. Oh well. I still think it's okay to call there because I think he can have so many hands in his range pre-flop that he just has to start stabbing with it various times. So I don't mind that call. Absolutely not, especially in a line that's very bluffy and a texture that's very bluffy. We're going to go ahead and check call with the top pair and the second nut flush draw on this monotone board after we raise pre-flop. It's probably okay to range check those monotone boards. I'm starting to get into learning about that a bit more. I used to just go ahead and range bet everything when I was the 3-better, isolating out of the blinds, but I think we should probably be range checking some monotone flops like that. I can go ahead and check call a second time with gut shot, second pair, second nut flush draw. It really gets interesting if I brick out the river and he bets again. And he really shouldn't be betting the flop with that hand, I don't think. and hits a pretty miracle turn card. And he's upset about the way the hand played out, too, I can tell. I think it's okay to go ahead and tag this guy as a recreational player at this point, especially after, I mean, the mere fact that he limp called pre-flop tells me that. Upper right-hand table, we're going to go ahead and range bet on the King 9-4 monotone flop after we 3-bet the under the gun player. Got a couple of recreational players limping into the pot. We'll go ahead and complete the small blind with Jack 10 off. It's a standard play there with limpers in play. I tend to complete with the hands that I don't isolate with if they were good enough to raise first in from the small blind. I don't know if that's truly a scientific way to approach completing versus limpers, but at least seems to have some semblance of logic of the type of hands I want to be playing from the small blind against in-position players. I'm sure that could be heavily refined by somebody with a bit more solver knowledge than me, but I'm not sure what you really do to account for the fact that you have a couple of limpers out there that just don't have any sort of intelligent range. It probably varies based on how wide they limp, but I don't really understand where it goes from there, so I just try to use a shortcut. Lower right-hand table, we can raise with the ace-5 offsuit from the button. You should be folding queen 10 and ace-8 offsuit on the button against opens, regardless of what position they came from. So we do. We get 3-bet, a little bit less than 3x by a player who's short, and we've got a very marginal dominated ace. I'm going to go ahead and fold this. It's probably pretty close because he's actually been doing that with a hand. He's done that a couple of times now. He doesn't seem like he's particularly nitty, but it's not good business to get yourself involved with those marginal offsuit weak aces. I'd rather come along with suited Broadway, suited connectors, even just any suited ace, suited king type hands, more so than, starting to call with ace-5 offsuit, queen 10 offsuit, that kind of stuff. Get open blind on blind by a recreational player that's also playing quite a number of hands. Ace-7 suited is a pretty easy defend, even in a normal situation, much less a one that's more favorable and loose as the one I just described. He bets full pot, essentially more than pot, on queen 7-5. I got to go ahead and call at least once with middle pair top kicker. If he starts showing a ton of aggression for large sizing, I think I can go ahead and get away from this hand. But just the mere fact that I'm in position deep and I could flop an ace or a 7, or hit an ace or a 7 on the turn rather, that makes my hand awfully strong, and he could keep barreling off into me and spazzing into me. I think I actually want to go ahead and call. Plus, it might be the best hand, especially after he's checked to me a couple of times. I guess the question is, do I actually try to value bet the 7? I'm not that worried about, in a wide situation, about, the pocket pairs better than 7, 8s plus being in the range. So I think it's largely queens or worse hands that connect with the board that matter here. I beat everything but the queen. I think I should go ahead and try to get some thin value from this spot. I can get called by a random 5x, 7-6. It's perhaps a little bit loose, but I don't know. I don't think it's too bad. I think it's something you should probably be doing. Especially, part of my initial reasoning for being in that pot, well, I was going to be in anyway, but part of my initial assessment of what was going on in that hand was the fact that this guy seems like he's probably not a great player. He's probably a weak player. He may be more prone to make these kind of mistakes I'm looking to exploit. So I think that all ties together. And you should go ahead and try to value bet the 7 on that river as played. I don't really play heads up too much, but I'm actually going to quit the session in a couple of minutes. And this guy seems like a special player, so I think it's a decent chance to stick around and play a few heads up hands. We're just going to check in from the big blind with Jack 8 offsuit, and we're going to check call on that 10-9-8 board where we have bottom pair and the open-ended straight draw, the top end of the open-ended straight draw. I'm just going to go ahead and just check call, check call and then check again on the river. I don't want to raise this quite yet and get myself into a real bad spot against a hand like King Queen that I'm just in so much trouble against that he could absolutely have. And I really never have that either myself. Plus, I want to give him a chance to keep bluffing at me. On the turn, we've got an open-ended straight draw. The limper from the button showed no love for it on the flop and didn't stab, so we're going to go ahead and bet it. I want to see what the heads-up guy had. He had 10-7, so he was betting top pair with the open-ender as well. I don't know why he bet the turn. The turn seems like a hand check back. He bets into me for 3 into 4.75 out of position. I don't really have great backdoor. There's no overcards and an ace-high board. They're less bluffy on ace-high boards, fish are, I believe, in general, as the pre-flop caller, just because they call with more silly aces in general. Heads up is probably a little bit different, but I think it's okay to be a little bit extra tight here. It's not like it's not like any card that comes on the turn makes me feel great. A heart doesn't make me feel great. A 9 doesn't feel like all of a sudden my hand is clearly good, especially if he keeps betting. A king does not. So even the equity I do have in the hand is not very robust. It draws to weak hands I might be just behind all along in the first place if he's got any ace. So I think it's okay. Just go ahead and fold. I'm not missing out on the chance to stack him where I make some big hand, with a hand like King 9 on that board. Lower left-hand table, King, King 4, three-way. I am not going to range bet, but I'm going to definitely bet my ace kings that come in. I get 3-bet by a probable recreational player just because he's short. I want to just go ahead and raise this back and get this in. I don't want to flat and give this guy another chance to come along and call. No, I want to 4-bet it and stack worse kings and whatnot. I think 9s are actually a bit too loose to re-raise with here. I want to be a lot tighter because I'm going to have to get so big. And I don't really want to have flats, even though if I was going to flat, 9s would be the kind of hand to do it with. But that's a lot of money to flat a raise with. I'm not going to call anything against that size, not in the rake environment that's as high as these games are. And I'm going to fold 9-7 to the button open. We're going to open 6s under the gun on the upper right-hand table. 5-4 is a little bit looser than I would tend to open blind on blind. And this guy that he's loose and wacky, I don't actually think I want to do that and be out of position with the hand so weak and it's going to be so tough to play. In general, I want to play more hands with that guy, but not 5 high out of position just because it's a little bit of connectedness to it. Going to open the ace-10 from the button. The small blind here versus that button raised first in, and we went and 3-bet him. We were actually 3-betting a little bit tighter range than would be typical against that guy just because he's been pretty tight so far. So I'm treating this more like a cutoff situation versus small blind, including how I respond to the 4-bet. Against that 4-bet, I'm trying to decide if I can actually go ahead and call this. I should not be jamming it, that's for sure. Although I think I can go ahead and call him. I can call and trap with my aces. I can call with hands like 9s, 10s, jacks, and maybe ace-jack, ace-queen, king-queen suited. In this particular board, I think I can go ahead and I can check-shove the range. I continue it. So the aces that I trap, my pairs, and my flush draws. No straight draws, but I think we got to go with 10s on a board this good and just fold ace-king out if we can. If we run into an overpair, it's going to happen some of the time, but I like to play pretty aggressively and try to not get moved off hands that are good, because I'm not going to fold my way to it. Now I did adjust to be tighter because that guy seemed like he was opening tighter, so we should be playing him a bit tighter, you know, not like a true button open. So that wasn't even as wide as I might have been continuing pre-flop against a player who seems to be a bit more aggressive or standard. But still, pocket tens is a pretty good hand to be folding, you know, in a small blind versus late position situation. I'm going to go ahead and shut these tables down to the next orbit. I'm going to start poking at him now after he checks back the flop. Although Queen High has, well, I was going to say it did have a lot of showdown value. Now it really is just going to play the board. I'm trying to think, I mean, I should be betting my King X for sure. I guess I should be betting my Ace X for a small size as well as my 7X could go in a big size. And I'm gonna put this hand in the small size bluff. I'm not really sure, but I want to try to fold him off a chop. He probably doesn't fold the chop very often. He certainly never folds if he's got a piece of the board. I think just trying to move him aggressively off a chop is going to be a better play than just trying to check down and chop or seeing if he bets and lets you check down a chop. Open 6-4 off, heads up versus this guy who we're specifically trying to go after. Just to get in some pots with him in position. You could probably be open in just about everything. I don't really know how heads up works very well, but I do know your raise first in range is going to be very, very wide. You know, probably 80% of hands or more. We'll open Jack 8 for sure. And he donks into me. I'm going to go ahead and fold. We're going to open deuces under the gun on the lower left-hand table. Can fold the 3X open with 10-7 off. Check range out of position on the lower left-hand table. Got a recreational player in there. Going to go ahead and start betting this, just to try to fold him off of whatever he's got. Now having hit that, we're going to go ahead and use an overbet size because our hand does not block any of the good call down hands and is so strong and so concealed. So we're going to go ahead and 2X pot that. Hope he's got an 8, hope he's got a flush. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet the heads up spot with the pocket tens. I'm going to see what he had, and he had Jack 10 with no, he had Jack of clubs, 10 of hearts, so he didn't have blockers to the flush. He had blockers. He had top pair with blocker to the straight. I don't know that I love his call, but that's why I overbet when I've got a hand like that that doesn't block the hands that are close to calling. You know, or kind of a decision. A hand like a weak Jack. I'm going to shut down here in a hand or two against this guy as well. I'm going to start betting on the turn after he decides to check back the flop. I'm going to go ahead and bluff the river. It ran out 4 to the straight, so I'm just going to use a pot-sized bet for pretty much everything that I bet, except for maybe some hands that are nutted or block nutted hands. You know, those could be overbets and overbet bluffs. When I get raised, of course, I'm just going to fold the queen high. And this is my last hand, so I'm just going to go ahead and open it. I think it's a reasonable hand to open heads up, though probably a weaker part of the range for sure. He checks to us. We're going to go ahead and c-bet, small size. We've got a gut shot. We've got blocker to the flush. Given that we're heads up, it's a pretty weak hand, but given that we're heads up and that bet size is pretty small, I mean, he's betting. He's not. I have to fold that less than half the time, so I've got to continue with the gut shot and the diamond. And I'm actually going to go ahead and start bluffing this guy when he checks. I'm going to use a small size when he checks to me on the turn after the check raise. I'm going to be particularly inclined to use that small size when it's a flush closing turn. And now that we hit the 10 of diamonds, the question is going to be, do we check back or do we try to value bet it? And this is a very strange line in which he goes check raise, check call, bet. I can't imagine I've got any kind of good data on a line like that. Check raise, check call, bet in general is not very bluffy, nor is the four flush river. But it's, you know, kings, jacks, or kings or jacks of diamonds are the only hands that beat me. So I don't really think there's any choice but to go ahead and call this with a hand this high up in the range, even though the line is kind of not very bluffy. This guy's kind of bluffy and clicks buttons. The sizing's not that scary, all things considered. I'm going to go ahead and call. And I was done, but he decided to quit me anyway at that point, I believe. But that was it for the session. I'm going to go ahead and close up. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. This is Charlie Murphy signing off.